Splendor sets the sun before the hours of darkness come. I hold this comfort through the night. My loss you wrapped in golden light will rise again in greater splendor. My golden light of yesterday. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way.
If you open your Bibles along with me to the Gospel according to Luke, it's Luke chapter 20. Well, let's open to 21. Once again, we'll look at the last couple of verses of 21 and then move on into 22. Last night, as my wife was downloading some stuff from the internet, and I was doing some other things, I was just listening to what she was listening to, and I overheard some really good words from George W. Bush, from Barack Obama, from Joe Biden, and they were all giving eulogies, good words, and they were doing so for a friend that at one time he'd been a foe politically. They'd competed for office. They were on different sides of different subjects, but in their eulogies, they spoke of the fact that though we were rivals and foes and had differences of opinions, we were friends and we loved one another, and all of those things. And as I heard all of that, I was thinking, that's the best sermon I could possibly give at any given time. And I've often thought, the more as the years go on, it's so sad that we don't have more eulogies for the living. We save them for when you're dead, and then we remember all the good stuff. But in the meantime, it's the meantime. It's the battle. It's well, what about this and what about that? And the word eulogism or evangelism, they're really almost the same word from the Greek language. It's good words, good message, good news. And I would like to be more of an evangelist, not just here, but everywhere I go. Good news, good words. Whatever is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely, whatever is of good report, anything excellent, worthy of praise. Set your mind, and where your mind and heart is, I think that maybe that's what's going to most likely come out of your mouth. Good words. I read earlier in the week something that was good news in the sense that it's been going on for a long time, but it didn't ever pop up in my news feeds. In fact, the weird thing about, because I look on internet for my news, and it's getting weirder and weirder. I don't know if it's just the world or if it's just me. I think it's a lot to do with me, because a lot of the stuff is things that I've been shopping for, and it's popping up on there. And then even the news, it's like, as I click on articles about Social Security, now everything in science, health, and technology in the news is all something about Social Security. And I thought, wait a second. But it's just, that's the way the internet works. That's kind of the way our brains tend to work as well. But at any rate, I read some good news that it was put, I'll give it to you in the way it came to me, in the form of a question. And the question was, over the last 20 years, the proportion of people in this world over the last 20 years who are living in extreme poverty, would you say that it might be twice as many living in extreme poverty as 20 years ago? Or would you say in the world maybe about the same 20 years ago as today living in extreme poverty? Or would you say that maybe almost half as many people in the world today are living in extreme poverty, almost half as many as were 20 years ago. And so, that was the question, and I made my guess, and if you can understand what I just said, then you make your guess. But the answer is, and these things are not fake news or statistical things you can fight over. I don't think anyone has a controversy about this fact. The fact is, the number of people living in extreme poverty in the world is almost 1/2 of what it was 20 years ago. That's good news. That's great news. It doesn't show up in my daily news, but it's been going on day after day, getting better and better. And isn't that an answer to our prayer, as Jesus taught us to pray? Father, our Father, give us today our daily bread. And all the work and efforts that go forth when people think and pray along those lines. And that's good news. For the last 20 years, it's almost 1/2 of what it is. So I was thinking, you know what? Just to be a better evangelist and more good words and more good news, I looked, and at least as far as my calendar shows, there's about 12 weeks between now and Thanksgiving. So if I can remember to do this, I'm going to try and find one good thing every week for the next 12 weeks, 12 weeks of good news. And I'm going to title that 12 Weeks of Good News. After that, it's going to be all bad, back to the bad news. But I just want to look for something every week that, like, hey, that's good news. And if the word good messenger and good news, if the word evangelical had more of that connotation, I might not be as skittish about that label as I am nowadays. But it's supposed to have that. That's supposed to be the idea, is good words and good news. And certainly when it comes to Jesus, in chapter 21, we saw Jesus telling us about the future. And instead of fear-mongering, instead of saying, be scared of this and be scared of that, quite the opposite, we saw in all of those red-letter words of Jesus there in chapter 21, basically he said, don't be followers, don't be fearful, don't be defensive, don't be quarrelsome, don't be downcast in vision, don't be heavy-laden in heart. 6 things, don't be. Those are the don't be attitudes. Don't be that. And then one thing to be. The last thing, he says, stand with the Son of Man. Stand with your brother Jesus, the Son of Man, and pray to the Father. Stand with the Son of Man and pray to the Father of the sons of men. Pray to the Father and say, our Father, feed us, forgive us, deliver us. Do that, and that's how to live for the future. That's how to be prepared for the future. So we saw all of that up to just about the end of chapter 21, and then it says in verse 37 that now during the day Jesus was teaching in the temple, but at the evening he would go out and spend the night on the mount that is called Olivet. So go out into the night and camp out there outside the city on the Mount of Olives. And it says all the people would get up early in the morning to come to him in the temple to listen to him. And if I had been there, if I was watching that, or if even I read about it on the news, I would say, that's good news, that's great news, that's incredible news. To read something like that. In fact, look at that last line again. It says all the people. Wow, all the people. And what are they doing? They're getting up early. That's pretty cool too. All the people are getting up early for a good reason. Not to go play the lotto. They're getting up early to come to him. People coming to Jesus, all the people getting up early to come to Jesus. It's not just they're coming to the temple or going to church. They're coming to Jesus. And why are they coming to Jesus? They're coming to listen to him. That's great news. They're not coming to experience a miracle. Now, I understand that when people are in need of a healing, Lord, I need a healing. People bringing someone on a stretcher and someone bringing someone even dead and saying, my child is dead. All of that, I understand we need miracles. And sometimes we're just curious. We want to see miracles. Maybe it'll help me believe. It won't, but sometimes we want to experience a miracle. When people wanted to be fed miraculously and sought for more of that miraculous bread. I don't fault people. I understand wanting to experience a miracle, but here they were coming just because they wanted to hear his teaching. In his teaching, we don't have to wonder what it was. You go to the Sermon on the Mount, go to his basic teaching. It was the same sort of thing. He gave parables and pictures, but it always came back to that root teaching. And they were coming, all of them coming to hear that. And I'm sure that those who were watching it happen were wondering, like we always do, when something unique or something marvelous is happening, what does this mean? And no, they weren't coming to experience a miracle, but to my mind, they were experiencing one of the greatest miracles. And no one noticed it. The miracle of the fact that we want what he has to say. We want to hear what he has to say. They were experiencing a miracle, unawares, as I think the greatest miracles always are. Like the woman we saw in the last chapter, she's putting in her 2 cents, and who would have noticed? But Jesus tells his disciples, now that's something that's never lost. That's something that's better than all that's being done by others. And so this miracle is taking place, and if you saw something like that, you might begin to, it's natural to say, so what does this mean? What's this adding up to? And those who were hopeful in the cause of Jesus, they might have been saying, this means revival, right? It's got to be revival. And those who were afraid of what Jesus was saying, who wanted to retain their own power, they weren't thinking revival, they were thinking revolution. And they were frightened by it all. But then just a couple of days later, he hangs on the cross. And when his body was brought down from the cross and buried away in the grave, I would bet that those who thought it was revival and those who thought it was revolution might finally have agreed. What it adds up to is nothing. The thing we feared didn't happen. The thing we hoped for didn't happen. It's nothing. You know, for us, wonderful, we know it's not the end. But you know, the whole belief that we have in the God of resurrection, the belief that we have in Jesus, is to know that truth continues always. The things that you think are going to be great because they're moving with the Son of Man, they're moving in love, they're never lost. All those teachings in the temple that day, it doesn't matter how many of these same people later in the week said, crucify him, or we want Barabbas. People are fickle. People are foolish. Welcome to the family. But God loves us. And he was not ashamed and isn't ashamed to call us brethren and to refer to himself continuously as the Son of Man. And so, you know, sometimes we feel like, I was so hopeful. Foolish, idealistic. No. If ever you hope in something good, don't worry. It'll come back. If ever you've done something loving, don't think that it's lost. Never. Every seed sown in hope and in love and in goodness and in kindness, it'll all come back. When you least expect it, it'll always come back again. And so, no, am I hopeful in humanity? No. Am I hopeful for humanity? Absolutely. Do I sometimes think that something looks hopeful and then it just like, flops and, oh well, another movement of man? But you know, there's no need to be cynical. And there's no mirror in front of my face right now, but that's who I'm talking to. Don't be cynical. Don't say, you know, never should have hoped here, never should have hoped there. If your hope is in Jesus, the Son of Man, there's tremendous hope for the human family. There's tremendous hope for humanity, and it's always found in Jesus. Our Father, feed us, forgive us, deliver us. I must be about my Father's business. That's the Father's business. It will succeed. It is succeeding more than you and I realize. I'm sure of it. I think if we ask for the eyes of our heart to be open, we'll find it. He's winning in ways around our life that we're not recognizing. There's more good news than bad news. There's more things to be excited and hopeful about. There's always problems, but the only thing that can get you through the problems and enable you to succeed in fighting the good fight is to know that good will win. To know that you're on the side of the one who comes back from the dead and who is victorious. And so here's all of these things, this last lines of chapter 21, and we might think, it's nothing, but no, that was a miracle. And again, the greatest of miracles are often unseen and unrecognized. And so it goes on to the next thing in terms of time. Verse 1 tells us, chapter 22, that the feast of the unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. And the funny thing is that this feast that was celebrated every year, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it was symbolic of a fellowship, a community where there's no leaven, no phoniness, no pride, no sin, no all that ugly stuff about who we can be. No leaven. And you celebrate a feast every year and you wonder, why do we do that? Because we're never any closer to it than we've ever been. But they kept doing their religious rituals, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But look what's going on in the news. The chief priests and the scribes, they're seeking how they might put Jesus to death. But it's only because they're afraid of the people. They thought it might be revolution there in the wings. And then Satan, he entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot. And he belonged to the number of the 12. He was one of the intimates that Jesus specifically chose after praying all night long. Satan entered into Judas. And Judas went away and he discussed with these chief priests and officers how he might betray Jesus to them. And they were glad and they agreed to give him money. And he consented and began seeking a good opportunity to betray him to them apart from the multitude. And all of that, if we didn't know the story so well, we might read it more like a story as presented. It's a tragedy. It's a drama. It's something that, again, the kind of things you see in the news. Look what's happening. Look what these people are doing. And whenever we have a tragedy, whenever we have a drama of that sort, we always want to find the good guys and the bad guys, and we always want to limit it to a level that really misses the point. Because we see here that though this is a tragedy, Luke is careful to record that Judas is not the enemy. That Judas is not the villain. You know, in every drama, we want to find a villain. We want to find snidely whiplash, someone you can ooh and jeer at. How many? Snidely whiplash. Okay, thank you. Things pop into my head once in a while, and I don't know. When I think about it, I know where it comes from, but I don't know if anyone else knows. Good, I'm glad you know. But if we're going to see this as that kind of a tragedy, Judas is not the guy, because the adversary. We may not speak Greek or Aramaic, the languages they spoke, and maybe that's our handicap sometimes. But the adversary, the enemy, the Satanas, for that's what the word Satanas means, the adversary. The adversary is not a son of man. It's not Judas. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's very clear the enemy, the Satanas, entered into Judas. And Judas is a part of the tragedy. Judas isn't the enemy of Jesus any more than these scribes and Pharisees and other folks that all have their issues. He, along with them, along with us, are part of the people that Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Now, there is a Satanas. There is one who knows what he's doing, and he's doomed to lose. But here in this scene, he enters into Judas and does what he does. And it's sad, but we know how it comes out in the end. We know how it all works together for good. And then it says in verse 7, then came the first day of the unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. And Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it. And they said to him, where do you want us to prepare it? Now Luke, of all the gospel writers, he's the only one that tells us who it was specifically that was sent. He says it was Peter and John that were sent out on this very important mission. It may not seem all that important to us because we're outside the culture, but Passover and getting that party, getting that whole thing ready was extremely important. And they all knew this was an important mission. And they knew that this Passover especially, for whatever reason, they knew this is a crucial thing. And we've already seen in Luke's writings earlier how these same guys, these specific guys, Peter and John, have messed up on previous missions. They were given assignments. They were sent out ahead of him. John was the one who asked the Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven? Do you want us to call in an airstrike on these Samaritan cities? They weren't receptive to having you, and Jesus said, you don't know what spirit you're of. And it was Peter who, trying to give advice to Jesus, that Jesus actually said, "You're a mouthpiece for Satanas. Get behind me, Satan." And while Satan needs to get out of the way, Peter still, he has his problems. We all have our problems, but Peter isn't Satan. Satan needs to get behind, but Peter is actually being sent forward. And so is John. And no matter how many times, we know of a couple of times, but no matter how many times they may have failed in the past, he still sends them forward to do something more. And I point that out because we're people of like nature, and certainly we have a father, and we have a friend in Jesus as they did. And oftentimes he sends us out to do things that we've already found ourselves to be lacking. We've already found ourselves to be so able to fail. And now I have to do this. And when he sends us to prepare for something, we almost feel like that's a pressure. I feel pressured. I have to prepare. I have to get it ready. This is important. Why me? Why am I the one? But the Lord knows. And this little picture, this little parable that we look at here in this section today, I hope that it helps you. Because it's a picture of being sent forth, preparing for Jesus, preparing something for him, preparing for him himself, preparing for Jesus. Here's these two being sent. And like I say, we know of a couple of times they failed. They didn't always fail. And I don't know, Peter seems to be often very, very confident, at least up to this point, overconfident. Maybe more confident than he should have been. But I know for myself sometimes, because of my previous failings, I feel like I'm not able to do the things the Lord is asking me or telling me that I can do. And I feel pressured. And in the case of Peter and John, I don't know how they felt, but I just know that Luke tells us they were sent forth. And just me as a reader of the book, I know enough to make me feel perhaps a little nervous that these are the ones that are being sent forth. A little nervous that these are the ones who are going out to do what they do. But, well, you know the story. It works out. Jesus knows what he's doing. Jesus sent Peter and John, and however they felt, if they felt a little nervous about it, their question in verse 9 is, when he said, "Go prepare the Passover for us that we may eat," they said, "Where? Where do you want us to prepare it? You're telling us to do something that's important. Can you give us a little bit more information?" And then the next few verses that follow. So we read that, think about it. I'll just put it to you this way. Are you prepared for Jesus? As far as the future goes, if he's sending you forth to do something, or if he says, "I'm coming again," which of course he has said, are you prepared for Jesus? And does that question frighten you? I hope so. Fear is such a wonderful thing. Are you prepared? No. I pray that this picture, this parable, would comfort you, would help you to see that when he tells you to be prepared or to prepare for something, he's doing so not to pressure you, but to give you a privilege. He doesn't need workers. We need to work. We need to be busy about his Father's business. Not just pray, "Father, feed them, forgive them, deliver them." No, I'm part of it. We're all in this together, but none of us are alone. He's with us. Father, feed us today. Forgive us today. Deliver us today. And it's a privilege to be a part of that. Privilege to pray it. Privilege to have that stir your heart and have you think along that line, and to know every given day there's something to do. There's needs all around me and good things to give me encouragement when there's sometimes overwhelming needs all around. So he says, "Go, prepare the Passover." And they said, "Where do you want us to prepare it?" Like I said, everyone knew. Some were frightened of revolution. The disciples were excited about possible revival of some sort. But everyone knew this Passover of all the Passovers was super important. And later on, when Jesus would sit down with them, he would say, I passionately longed to sit down with you at this time. So all of them would have known this is really important. So give us a clue, Lord. Where We're going to put on an important party. Usually these things are thought out way in advance. This is the day of the unleavened bread. We got to do it now. Where do you want us to prepare it? And he said to them, verse 10, behold, when you have entered the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. When you come into the city, a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. I've been in airports before where I'm meeting someone who's flown in and I've never met them, they've never met me, and everyone's carrying a placard. It's like, here's who I am. Are you? Trying to, and you have an idea of who you're looking for, and sometimes you're surprised who you find. Jerry was telling me about his family members. They were looking for a fella they'd never met, going to marry into the family. He was from Asia, an Asian fella, and they knew his name, but they're kind of looking for someone maybe about 5'5" or so, because they had this idea. He's an Asian fella, and all of a sudden they look up and this guy's, way, well over 6 feet tall, There's the name, but it wasn't what I was expecting. Well, here's this scene where they come in, and remember, Jerusalem is extremely crowded. It's just, masses of people there. And he says, a man carrying a pitcher of water. And actually, that would have been, apparently, a very effectual sort of thing to look for, because apparently, that just wasn't done. Again, in our culture, it's like, what's the big deal? But apparently in theirs, and I'm just telling you what other people told me. I'm not that old, I wasn't around. And quite frankly, I have told stories in the past that I come to find out later, and that was wrong too. I got my information wrong. But on this one, the thing that I hear, and it makes sense, is that men just did not carry pitchers of water. This was woman's work. This was sissy stuff. This is something, that only a woman would do. And so it would be a pretty strange thing. It would be almost an unheard of sort of thing for a man to be carrying a pitcher of water. So Jesus said, when you enter in, you'll see a man carrying a pitcher of water. And he's going to come up to you. Now, their job when he comes up to them is not to say, wow, you're weird. You're doing sissy stuff. This is not the way it's supposed to be. Your job is not to correct him. Your job is not to say, you know what, I feel weird standing next to you, because you're doing what isn't done in this culture, and that just doesn't seem to make sense. Jesus said, just understand it's out of the ordinary, but it's part of the plan. And all I'm asking you to do is not just be willing to stand with him, but walk with him. Be seen in the open street. Go along with him. Don't be, saying to everyone, I'm with him, but I'm not really with him. I don't do that sort of thing. Just be with him. Just walk with him. Just go along. And that was the first part of the picture. Something out of the ordinary, something you wouldn't expect. But I would say, just based on my experience and based on this picture, that if you're preparing for the Lord, be prepared to encounter things that you weren't prepared for. Be prepared to deal with things that are out of the ordinary, and be willing to just walk with it, go along with it. Be willing to say, look, I don't understand this, I haven't figured it out, it doesn't really much matter in this particular case. I don't know how much of a shock this was to them. And I'm not trying to, I'm not saying this guy was transgender or transvestite or all the things that we deal with in our culture today, the things that we could make sermons every week on some scary cultural war situation. We got difficult things to deal with. I don't know where this particular thing would have met within the culture, but I do know that Jesus was often talking about things that were totally shocking to them. About the concern for the Roman soldier going the extra mile, and the love for the Samaritans and the Syrophoenician women, and just even hanging around and talking to a woman at the well in Samaria. He did all kinds of things that if you weren't prepared to be willing to walk with and deal with things you weren't prepared for, you couldn't have dealt with it. So just knowing all of that, I would simply say the best way to be prepared for the future is be prepared for a future in which you may end up doing things or being involved. The more I talk, the more I feel like I'm putting my foot in my mouth. I'm not counseling or advising or saying I know about a lot of things. I'm just saying this was kind of a strange deal. Jesus did a lot of things that didn't fit within the culture. But sometimes that's part of the signal that, you know what, this isn't the way it usually is. I'll just work with it. I'll walk with it. Just go along with the guy. And now that I feel like I've totally butchered the whole deal, you can be prepared. You're going to deal with Bible teachers that don't know what they're talking about. But so, where am I? I got to see if you're right. I don't just believe anyone that calls out 11. Okay. I just got this word from on high. I think the Spirit spoke to me. Yes, it's 11. And you shall say to the owner of the house, so you just follow this guy, okay, be willing to do that. Say to the owner of the house, the teacher says to you, where is the guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples? So no real introduction, no name badges, simply the teacher. And this guy is supposed to know, and clearly he does know. Clearly, either this is that Jesus just knows, because he does know, that's not surprising to me, or maybe it's also that Jesus has gone before them and knows this guy and has talked to this guy and has prepared the way that you're now going to prepare for something that he's already pre-prepared for you to prepare. And that's typical of him. That's really to be expected. You're never alone, and even if you're frightened to go forward, understand there's always one who's gone before you. That's the whole picture of the Lord who's led the way to the cross and through the grave and into the heavens. He's led the way all the way. And so they go there, and he tells them, just say, the teacher has told me to tell me where the guest room is. And then Jesus said he will show you a large furnished or a large prepared upper room, so prepare it there. So they went to not just some dinky little out of the way, this isn't like Bethlehem and no room at the inn sort of story. This is something where, in fact, everything is ready. It's a large room, the kind that no way, even if on Expedia, you couldn't get that booked that short a time, but the Lord had been ahead of time, and it was ready, and it was a furnished room. It was a prepared room. He says, prepare in that prepared room. Now, the fact that it was all furnished, laid out, set for the Passover for all of the disciples doesn't mean there still weren't things like the herbs and the water and the wine and the bread and different things to do. There's always something to do, but probably not nearly as much as you were afraid of. As you're going forward thinking, I have to be preparing something for the Lord, I'm preparing something for my family, I'm preparing for the future, and all of the fears, if you're anything like me, all of the fears of all the things I'm going to have to do, all the worries stacked up on my head today when, in fact, they're laid out in a timeline. But I pulled them all into my own thinking, and I'm like feeling so pressured. Then you come to find that, you know what? So much it wasn't necessary. Just like Jesus always told us, it's not necessary to worry. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so it's not like they get there and everything is prepared, but way more than they thought would have been ready. It's ready. It's already ready. So now there are still some things to do, so do the little things that still need to be done. Because again, God wants to give us the privilege of being a part of the process. He's preparing something. He's getting things together. And so they go into that upper room and they find it's already there, prepared there. And then it says, verse 13, bottom line of this little story, is that they departed. They trusted Jesus enough by now to know that what he says is so. And scared or not, they went. And they went forward and they found everything just as he had told them. You can be assured that's going to be the same for you. Afraid or not, keep going forward. You're going to find everything just as he has told us. And they prepared the Passover. I like that little line. In my Bible, I put quote marks around they prepared the Passover. Again, if they're anything like me, they would have thought, yes, high five, we did it, we prepared it. But you look back and you see that no, they got to have a hand in something that the hand of the Lord had been working on and preparing the way and making sure they met who they needed to meet and how they would know what they'd need to know, and everything was already ready. And again, that's just a picture. And it's a parable. And yes, of course it happened, but really so much of life is pictures and parables. And maybe we don't celebrate the Passover anymore. We still have parties and celebrations and things that we worry about, important things that we think are pressures on us. We need to get it done. But if it's good and it needs to get done, it'll get done. And beyond that, of course, we have the bigger picture of preparing myself and my family for the future, preparing for the second coming, or all of those things that can be so frightful and intimidating. But I think the answer is the same in regard to all of those. Preparing for Jesus is always a privilege. It's never a pressure. He could just come and do the work without us. He could do the work for us without us. In many ways, he already has done the work for us without us. He went to the cross alone. The great work was already done without us. But now he gives us the privilege of letting us be involved in the preparation, being involved in the lives of our kids, the lives of friends, helping prepare them. It's a privilege to be involved in the lives of others. It's a joy. It's an opportunity. And so, just like this little picture of that day when they went to get this important Passover ready and found that he'd gone before them and had so many things ready and prepared, I would encourage you, based on this picture, keep going forth in hope, keep going forth in faith. Even though you can look back like Peter and John maybe and see a failure in your own life, and maybe this is a mistake, it's no mistake. Have the hope that God's gone before you and he can work it out. And know that in life, just like in this little picture here, things may not turn out like you expected. You may have thought that a revival was happening, or you may have feared that a revolution was about to take place, but it may mean that, didn't turn out like I thought. But in the end, it's going to turn out exactly like he promised. And that's always the encouragement. Heaven and earth will pass away, but his word, what he said, will never pass away. Just that night, after they went and prepared that room that he had already prepared for them, he told them some things that just totally rocked their life. Their hearts couldn't have been more heavily hit than they were hit that night. And yet he said to them, don't let your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many places to dwell, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. So you prepared this place for me, but didn't you see that I was with you and I made it all work out? Now I'm going to prepare a place for you. And trust me, that your opportunity to be a part of it, no matter how you fail, I'm not going to fail you. So in terms of the future, in terms of being prepared for the future, preparing for Jesus, prepare to be surprised, prepare to be challenged, prepare to find at times that things are not like the way you thought it was supposed to be, but be open to the fact that maybe what you thought is wrong. I thought a wrong thing once or twice in my life. I've changed my opinions on a number of things. I've changed my views on a number of things, but I haven't changed my values. I haven't changed who I am in terms of the core when God touched my heart and touched my life. And I wanted my life to have meaning, and I wanted to help people, and I wanted to do things that were good. And since then, I've done some things that I thought were good that I say, that probably wasn't all that good, or that wasn't the best way, or that wasn't the best method. I've changed my position as the Lord has grown my heart. And sometimes the greatest stretches and the greatest changes of heart have to come when you're willing to change your position. But the fact is if you don't change your position once in a while, you're dead. I've seen that just from my medical background. Anyone who doesn't change their position once in a while, either if within 2 hours, if you don't change your position, you're going to get a bed sore. That's the first thing I'm going to teach you. Even when you're sleeping, you better change your position once in a while. But if you never change your position, it's only because you're dead. If you're alive, then you're going to find out that sometimes there's a view, there's a way, there's something that you thought was supposed to be this way, and maybe not. And maybe you're still wrong a little bit, because we all are, at least a little bit. But the good news is that God is for us, and Jesus has joined us. And we stand with the Son of Man in a living relationship with a Heavenly Father. And it's not, we're going to change the world for whatever we think the world should be. It's just, Father, feed us, forgive us, deliver us. There are so many things we need deliverance from. So many things that I was brought up a Roman Catholic. I read about all the things in the Catholic Church in the news these last few days. I don't, for a moment, I don't feel like, yes, I'm so glad I'm not a Catholic. I knew it, they were wrong. I've heard a lot of terrible things in terms of Calvary Chapel and pastors in general and evangelicals. And all of that doesn't make me feel like, well, I'm glad I'm on this side now, I'm glad I'm on that side. I feel ashamed for all of it. And yet I feel it's family in all of it. It's a problem we all have. It's a problem of humanity. God help us. And he will. The Son of Man has come to save us and deliver us. And if we pray to him and try to help one another, there's a lot of ugly things. Of course there are. And if you uncover enough things, you'll find more ugly things. But keep looking for the good. Keep being hopeful. We're so blessed to have faith. If you have faith, what a blessing to have some faith. We're so blessed to believe, not because it makes us better people, but it makes us better off. To believe that, you know what, this wasn't a waste. And this is still a good thing. And this is still something worth working at and fighting for. Don't grow weary in well-doing. For in due season you'll see that every seed sown in goodness and kindness, it'll come back again. And as far as being prepared, be prepared to be surprised, because eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those who love him. And why do we love him? Because he first loved us. It's the way it always is. He loves us, and he loves them. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. Isn't that good news? Isn't that a wonderful message? Wouldn't people be happy to be around you if you brought that message everywhere you went? I hope so. I hope that's the message in our heart. Be hopeful. God's very hopeful for what he can do. Let's turn to him with a closing song.
Golden splendor sets the sun before the hours of darkness come. I hold this comfort through the night. My loss you wrapped in golden light will rise again in greater splendor. My golden light of yesterday. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way. Of man, no wounding words, no crushing hand can take this hold on which I stand. We'll rise again in greater splendor with golden lights of yesterday. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way. in splendor sets the sun before the hours of darkness come. I hold this comfort through the night. My loss you wrap in golden light will rise again in greater splendor. My golden light of yesterday. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way. We'll rise again in greater splendor with golden lights of yesterday. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way. There is no death, just sweet remembrance of greater glory that's on the way. There is no death, just sweet surrender to greater glory that's on the way.